Hello, my name is Mariana Rojo, and we're talking about the foundations of ESL education. And when I say ESL education, I mean all the languages which are not English, for all the students who come to America and are English language learners. Let's talk about Mendez versus Westminster. In 1946, there was a court case that dealt with a desegregation for Mexican Americans in California. And apparently, they were discriminating them, and this court case gave them the equal rights for school so that they could go to the same school in Santana. Now, Hernandez versus Texas was in 1954. This landmark case extended the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to Mexican Americans and other minorities. As you may remember, the 14th Amendment says that you cannot be discriminated against the color of the skin or the race or the place of origin. And this was not necessarily an education court case, but it was significant for bilingual education because it gave Mexican Americans and other minorities the protection of the 14th Amendment, which then led to more court cases that appealed to the 14th Amendment. So, Diana versus the Board of Education in 1970. The issue was that there was a Mexican American student labeled as EMR. And this was based on an IQ test that was given and written in English. So, naturally, if she didn't speak English, which she didn't, she failed the test, and her 14th Amendment rights were violated because she was placed in a special education classroom when she could have just been placed in a bilingual classroom. And if she was placed in a special education classroom, how many other students at that year got placed in special education classroom just because they were giving a test in the wrong language? Now, Cisneros versus Corpus Christi was in 1971, and Mexican American students, they were discriminated in Corpus Christi and they were segregated, and this court case integrated all three groups: whites, Mexican, and blacks. Now, Serna versus Portales was in 1972 and 1974, and you're gonna notice that most court cases that we're gonna talk about next are in 1974, so look out for that. This was a bilingual education act that reauthorized the Act of 1968. It expanded the requirements to all English language learners, regardless of the socioeconomics. It required all the schools to comply whether or not they received the federal funding. It provided the funds for the districts to establish a curriculum, provide training to staff, and conduct research on bilingual programs to know which one they worked best for all the students. And this was a significant court case because it was the first successful court case that sought support for bilingual education. Now, let's talk about Law versus Nichols in 1974. And like I said before, ESL and bilingual education, it talks about Chinese and Portuguese as well. As you see in these pictures, all these students, they first wrote their name in their native language and then they wrote it in English. And this court case became the tool for implementation in the bilingual education in the U.S. Now, Aspira versus New York was in 1974. And this court mandated a citywide assessment and identification of students in need of special language services. As you see in this picture, it says soy aspirante. It means I aspire. And this picture is very significant because it says New York on the sun, and the sun rises. And just like these students aspire to rise almost like a sun, it allows hope to grow, and it allows students to get ahead when they are taught in their language. And this was in New York. It was representing Puerto Rican legal defense. Now, Rios versus Reed in 1977. This school district was required to take an affirmative action for the language deficient student by establishing an ESL and bilingual program and keeping the students in the programs until they had attained the sufficient proficiency in English. And they were not allowed to compromise the students' right to the meaningful education before they were proficient in English. This was a significant court case because for the schools who were only providing half of the education that they were supposed to the ESL students, it allowed them to rethink what they were doing. Now let's talk about Castañeda versus Picard. Castañeda versus Picard was in 1981. And it was a significant court case for bilingual education because it mandated a 3-step process to develop quality bilingual education. It enforced the law remedies, and the 3-step process was: 1. Theory. The school had to pursue a program based on the educational theory recognized as sound or legitimate experimental strategy. Number 2, they had to practice. The school had to implement the program and with the resources, the practice, the personnel, everything that was necessary to make the theory into a reality. Number 3, they had to have results. The school had to not persist in the program that failed, but they had to find a program that produced results. So this was a federal court case, and it was very, very important for bilingual education because it developed quality bilingual education. Now, the U.S. versus the state of Texas was when the state of Texas had segregated Mexican American children to inferior schools and mandated a bilingual program. In 1981, the United States versus the state of Texas, they had a mandatory bilingual education in kinder through 12th grade, and this was a decision that was outlined with specific requirements including 3-year monitoring cycles to identify the English language learning students, and a language survey for students entering the school, and establish the need for the exit criteria. It was significant because it gave the students what they needed in order to be successful. And that was all for today. Thank you very much. Have a great day. This was Mariana Rojo. Bye bye.